beacon on the high tower. Do you know what color it glows when Old Town calls its banners to war?
Green.
Hey guys, Pete here. Today I'll be talking about House of the Dragon's 5th episode, We Light the Way. The final episode in the extended prologue we've been navigating through to better understand all the major players in this story's motivations. It's a fast-moving hour of television that answers the question that's been on all of our minds for the past week. What could go wrong at a royal wedding in the Game of Thrones universe? Much and more. Much and more. We also see Daemon solve a problem, Viserys continue to fall apart, Criston Cole take a swing and a miss, and Queen Alicent reached the end of her rope in relation to her teenage best friend Rhaenyra. As far as what I've read, this is the last time we're going to see Millie Alcock and Emily Carey in these roles. And I suppose after this episode, things do all seem to be in place so that we can jump forward in time to see if Princess Rhaenys' fears that the realm won't accept her niece Rhaenyra becoming queen are correct. I'll be getting into what happened and all of that, and I'll be talking about the source material. But as always, I won't be giving away any future spoilers in this video. And with that out of the way, let's get into it. The episode opens with Daemon finally following his brother's advice to go back to Runestone, where we meet his wife, Lady Rhea Royce. Contrary to his statement about the sheep being prettier than the women in the Vale, which is something he said in King's Landing, but it's made its way back to her. In reality, she turns out to be good looking. And despite his never consummating their marriage and not really ever spending any time here, she has a pretty solid read on who he is. In another one of those scenes where he doesn't have any dialogue, she picks up the slack reestablishing everything that's wrong with their marriage, and at least from her experience, what's wrong with him personally. Because she's so intent on pushing his buttons, there is some sense of ambiguity about if this could have gone a different way. Still though, his marriage is a significant obstacle to Daemon advancing himself, and it doesn't seem all that likely that he was coming to repair their marriage and just snapped in the moment. So it's not that surprising when he picks up the rock to finish the job after she's thrown from her horse. Her final statement of, "I knew you couldn't finish, Craven," may have been a button too far. But this is Daemon making himself an eligible bachelor again. And it's interesting for book readers because this is the second week in a row that the show clarified a situation that was left up to interpretation. And in both cases, it skewed towards the more extreme option. It really makes me wonder about some future events that are still to come. At sea, his brother Viserys is looking ill, and we get our first look at Lyonel Strong wearing the Hand of the Kingpin. We knew that he'd have to replace Otto after what happened at the end of the last episode, and Lyonel was presented as his best option. The king appears to be seasick, but then it also seems to be related to everything else that's going on with him, which has been progressing since the second episode. Back at the Red Keep, we do see his previous hand, Otto Hightower, getting ready to leave, and he has a final conversation with his daughter Alicent. Of course, she doesn't want to see him go, and he takes that opportunity to twist the knife a little by telling her that she's the one that made it possible when she chose Rhaenyra. She tries to explain, and after all, her good friend, who she does trust, did go as far as swearing on her dead mother. But Otto says that you wanted to believe her just like her father did, and you have to imagine that this makes the betrayal sting that much more. In the process of defending her decision, she tells him he shouldn't have been so intent on making Aegon heir, which in the book's version of events is the thing that led to his removal. But he fires back that the king will die. Maybe not tomorrow, maybe not next month, but he's not going to live to be an old man. And all the visual evidence seems to be backing that up. And the point is that if Rhaenyra takes the throne, there will be war. And we'll hear Rhaenys echo this later, which these are two characters that have their own motivations, especially Otto, but they're also very close to power and understand how things work in this universe. So they're probably not completely wrong. The most important thing he does here, though, is he plants a seed. He says to secure her claim, she'll have to put Alicent's children to the sword. And this could be something that the young queen never considered. If Rhaenyra is trying to hold on to power, if she's trying to hold on to her birthright, then a simple solution is to eliminate other potential heirs. It's a gruesome thought, but you could see how someone who had a stake in that power remaining where it is could come up with this as a solution. He leaves her by saying that the time is coming. Either you prepare Aegon to rule, or you cleave to Rhaenyra and pray for mercy. And we know he's telling her this at a time when her ability to trust in what Rhaenyra says will be tested. He does give her a hug goodbye, which seems earnest, but they have such a strange father-daughter relationship that it still seems somewhat hollow. And now, standing in front of the Red Keep, there is a real sense that she's alone. I think you could read this as he loves his daughter, but he can't express that. He doesn't know how to. And although he's lost his position, all those years of holding it would mean that he still has influence. He still knows the power players. He would still have reach, but he will be leaving the castle itself. Based on the decisions he's made, I doubt many fans will miss him, but this is a loss for Alicent, who now finds herself surrounded by those kooky Targaryens. Right on time, Larys Strong, the son of the New Hand, injects himself into her life as a possible ally when he has a conversation with her in the Godswood, which appears to be where she likes to spend her time. He talks about a plant that's native to Braavos that's growing in the garden, referring to it as an outsider among the natives. Not unlike a high tower in the middle of all those Targaryens, and it's almost as if this is exactly the kind of thing that she might really be receptive to hearing about right at this moment. He reveals quite a lot about who he is in this interaction. That he knows so much about the plant says he's educated, and his line, "When one is never invited to speak, one learns instead to observe," says a lot about his MO. He comes off as extremely calculated when he brings up Rhaenyra. He makes clear accusations by bringing up the moon tea that the Grand Maester took to her room without clarifying what the Maester was doing there, and he backs off each time he senses that Alicent might focus her anger on him. He's presented as an unassuming character, but I think it's pretty clear by the way this all plays out that there's a lot more going on under the surface. When the king arrives at House Velaryon's high tide, there's no one there to meet him. Just Laenor and Joffrey Lonmouth sparring in the front yard. When Lyonel objects to the lack of a welcome party, Laena comes out to take him to her father. We see that Corlys is playing politics a bit. He's arranged it so that he would meet the king in front of the Driftwood throne, which is the ancient high seat of House Velaryon. He brings up the news of the death of Daemon's wife, and after they go around about that, Viserys makes his proposal that Laenor will marry his daughter and heir, Rhaenyra. Corlys does want to get some details straight, and they decide that the couple's firstborn will follow Rhaenyra in the line of succession regardless of gender. But in the Westerosi tradition, they will be born Velaryon until one of them takes the throne, which they'll do as Targaryens. Viserys says dragons will rule the realm for the next 100 years, just as they have for the previous century. Out on the beach, the royal couple-to-be talk, and Rhaenyra lets him know that she knows he's not interested in women. She proposes that they go through with the marriage to do their duty for their fathers, but once it's done, they can do whatever they want. He can keep his lover Joffrey, and she can keep hers. When he's alone with his partner, they agree that this is better than they could have hoped for, but they do wonder who her paramour is. Back inside, Rhaenys worries that they're putting their son in danger. Because she was passed over, she knows that a large part of the realm will likely reject Rhaenyra. And in her words, knives will come out for her, her husband, and their children. Much in the same way that Otto told Alicent that her children wouldn't be safe. Corlys points out that many of the lords already pledged themselves to her, but his wife reminds him that that all happened before there was a male heir. Together, their families do control the largest navy and half of the world's dragons, so he's confident they can just crush anyone that tries to move against them. And while this may be the case, Rhaenys seems averse to further conflict or a prolonged war, because in the end, what's it all for? It's about power, but Corlys tries to reframe it as justice for her being passed over back at the Council of 101. And the takeaway here is that her concerns are legitimate. On the way back to King's Landing, Criston Cole makes his move. He asks the princess to run away with him, saying they could leave all of this behind and see the world together. They could have a marriage for love, not for the crown. And he points out all the ways that she's told him that this might be something that she wants, but he's catastrophically underestimated what she would be giving up. For as much as she likes to complain about it, she is in line to be the most powerful woman in the world. And she tells him, I am the crown, or I will be. And do you think I would throw it all away to go off and just be a nobody, basically? And what's interesting here is that in her mind, she has this already figured out. She knows she has to marry someone. Sir Laenor will make a fine husband, especially because he's not interested in being her husband in that way. And in that, they have this deal in place. This is something that Criston doesn't take well, saying, you want me to be your whore. And I think this is something that makes sense to a point. I understand why he reacts this way in this situation. He took a big chance, he planned this out, and he got rejected. She says, I want this to continue as it began, with you as my sworn protector, my white knight. And that tracks. I mean, when you're born a princess, why shouldn't you get everything just as you want it? His problem is that he took this oath and he broke it, and that white cloak was essentially all he had in the world. He thought if they were married, he might be able to restore his honor. And when she explains, hey, look, the Iron Throne's bigger than both of us, it makes it pretty clear where his honor lands on the list of things that she's worried about here. And in the end, he walks away in disgust. When they return to King's Landing, we see Viserys fall down in the yard with Alicent looking on. Because of the seeds that Larys planted, she summons Criston to her chambers to try to learn more about what happened with Daemon. Because of his guilty conscience, Criston admits that he slept with the princess. He explains that it was her idea, but he doesn't see that as an excuse. He just asks that instead of gelding or torturing him, that she'll show some mercy and sentence him to death. The queen is completely caught off guard, like she didn't see this coming at all. And after she puts all the pieces together in her head, she just dismisses him because what else can she actually say here? We also have a scene with Viserys in his chambers with Grand Maester Mellos working with a new maester named Orwyle. The king looks absolutely terrible, and at this point, I'm not sure if they're trying to show us that Mellos is actually not up to the task of taking care of him, or what's going on, because he's not that old and he's just falling apart. He has a conversation with the Hand about his legacy, which to me indicates that he's worried that he might not be long for the world. Then we see the Velaryon fleet arriving with Rhaenys on her dragon Meleys and her son Laenor on Sea Smoke. Meleys was first ridden by Viserys and Daemon's mother, Alyssa Targaryen, and there are even stories of her strapping her sons to her chest to take them flying when they were babies. Rhaenys claimed the dragon after her death and has ridden her ever since. In episode 3, we saw Laenor riding Sea Smoke in battle at the Stepstones, and it felt like a little bit of a missed opportunity because there's another dragon rider in this family, but based on the trailer for the upcoming episode, I guess they were reserving that for a later reveal. As I mentioned at the beginning, the big question going in is what could possibly go wrong at a royal wedding in Westeros? We see that the king is making a show of it, and we see the various families arrive, the Lannisters and the Hightowers. When we see Jason Lannister come up to address the king, we realize that Alicent hasn't arrived yet. She's not sitting next to her husband. So Gerald Royce tries to get a word in about his cousin Rhea, but gets interrupted by the dramatic arrival of the Velaryon family, who let's just say know how to make an entrance. What's funny is that as dramatic as it is, they're followed by Daemon, who steals their thunder because everyone seems a little surprised that he's there. If you'll remember, when his brother exiled him at the end of the last episode, he was pretty serious about him not coming back. The fact that Viserys had to have a chair and a place setting brought in indicates that they weren't expecting him. But Daemon timed things pretty well to set up a situation where no one is in a position to do anything about it. Speaking of timing, just as he stole the Velaryon's thunder, Queen Alicent has decided that this is going to be her night to make a statement. The king starts to give a speech that is interrupted when she ups the stakes as far as dramatic entrances are concerned and walks to the table wearing Hightower green. They do a thing here where they have Larys explain what's happening to his brother, that the Hightower burns green when they're calling their banners, which I kind of wish they didn't have to do, but I guess it might not be clear that the dress is important with everything else that's going on if you aren't already familiar with the story. This iconic green dress is her repping the house she was born into, instead of the one she finds herself in, and to top things off, she addresses Rhaenyra as stepdaughter. There was a lot of chatter about Rhaenyra going as far as swearing on her dead mother that she was still a maiden in the last episode, and this indicates just how much of a betrayal Alicent sees that as. One that led to her father being removed as hand, and that left her alone in King's Landing. She looks absolutely filled with rage, but the party must go on. And we do see things pick up. There's a quick shot of a dwarf playing a drum that is at the very least a reference to Mushroom, the fool from the book who wrote a lot of the more salacious accounts of what was going on in the story. And we do see Rhaenyra and Laenor dance. There's a lot going on in this celebration, but what stood out to me the most was everyone's faces as they're looking around. Daemon, Alicent, Criston, and Joffrey. Sir Gerald does come back up to accuse Daemon of killing his wife, but he gets pretty much shut down. We missed an opportunity there to see two warriors go up against each other who both wield a Valyrian steel blade. Daemon has Dark Sister, and House Royce has Lamentation. We see Daemon watch Rhaenyra, like the creepy, inappropriate uncle he is, and he catches Lady Laenor looking at him. He goes to her, and he opens with a line that was attributed to Mushroom in the book, where he says, "Has anyone ever told you that you're nearly as pretty as your brother?" And there does seem to be some chemistry going on between these two characters. In the middle of everything, Joffrey, which is not the best name to have when you're thinking about a royal wedding in Westeros, thinks that he's figured out Criston is Rhaenyra's paramour, so like you do, he just walks right up to him and lets him know. To his credit, he thinks their interests align and that he's making a pact that will be beneficial to everyone. But as we'll learn later, his timing couldn't have been worse. We see Daemon cut into a dance between Rhaenyra and Harwin Strong. She kind of out-Daemons Daemon by daring him to cut through the Kingsguard and take her to Dragonstone to make her his wife. He sort of grabs her face as Viserys looks on, which serves as a reminder that there is passion between these two. That wasn't just a fluke at the brothel. Then everything gets interrupted when Criston Cole beats Joffrey to death in front of everyone. Apparently he snapped. Laenor even gets caught up in it. We see Harwin jump in to save Rhaenyra, but only after his father tells him to do it. And yeah, he just beats his face in completely. Then no one stops him when he walks out of the room. I suppose this ruins everything, so they call in the Septon and he marries them that night rather than waiting for the full week of tourneys and everything else that was supposed to happen. So Criston goes to the Godswood to kill himself, but Alicent stops him. And then during the wedding, as they're exchanging their vows, with Laenor essentially fighting through his heartache because his lover just died, once again we see Viserys pass out on the floor. Then the episode comes to an end as we see a rat come up to take a taste of the blood that Joffrey left behind. Compared to episode 4, I was a little mixed on this one. Lore-wise, there was a lot to like, and as much as I never cared much for Alicent as a character in the book, her arrival at the wedding here was fantastic. Following after Daemon, where you're still stuck in the what the hell is he doing here mode, made this all the more memorable. Plus, High Tide was really interesting. Corlys has collected all this strange stuff from his adventures. On the negative side, I think they leaned a little too far into playing with our expectations surrounding a Westerosi wedding. And even though they set it up so everything would make sense, I felt that some of the Criston stuff, it just felt contrived. They compressed some things in order to have everything happen at this celebration, and after watching it the first time, I was just sort of like, oh, okay, that's a way you could bring things together, I guess. I think the desired effect was, wow, I didn't see that coming, and hell yeah, we're getting back into some real Game of Thrones action. But the green wedding didn't rise to the heights of some of the other ones we associate with colors, and it felt like they were trying to stoke my expectation that something was about to happen so much that once it did actually come, it was just sort of like, oh, is that it? The one thing that makes sense in taking this route, though, is it puts him in a place where Alicent has to rescue him. He could very well lose everything. I mean, that's why he went to the God's Wood to take his own life. And her rescuing him will come with the price of her basically owning him, which, depending on how they play that, could lead to some interesting situations because he is someone who represents something that Rhaenyra cared about at one time, at least. I do like the emphasis on the messy nature of all these unions that are made in the interest of preserving power, though. We've gotten to see some of the cases where it worked out with Viserys and Aemma and Corlys and Rhaenys. So you can see where they wouldn't have that much interest in changing this system. And I particularly liked Rhaenys calling Corlys out on his motivations, because even though he's saying he's going to do what's necessary to right the injustice she suffered, she's moved on and knows that it's more about power and wealth for this man that she clearly loves anyways. We've seen the opposite end of things with Daemon and Rhea, which is funny because that all seems to stem from her being able to see through his BS. To their credit, Rhaenyra and Laenor seem to have a good plan to make the most out of their situation, and that made the somber situation of their wedding, and especially his vows, hit pretty hard. Also, as lowborn as Criston Cole is, in relation to this person that he's entered into this forbidden relationship with, it's not terribly surprising that he would miss how she would never give that up. And then we have to ask ourselves, is this the way he would react? Or is it common enough he should have actually realized that, hey, this isn't that bad of a situation? The Strongs are some of my favorite characters in this part of the story, so it was fun to see Larys working the situation with Alicent and the conversation between Lyonel and Viserys. I'm not sure if their intention is for us to suspect Larys as the one who sent the tea, or they're just showing that he has those Varys or Littlefinger characteristics of being able to go in and find the weak link and get the information off of different people in different positions. But I know a lot of people were wondering if the king actually sent that, so this could be something towards your answer. A pretty solid episode besides the somewhat confusing and underwhelming ending, and a pretty solid first half of the season. To this point, they've made these characters far more compelling than they were in the book, without really changing their nature. I think that bodes well for the future since the story does change gears once the characters get older. It's been an interesting look at how they become who they'll be. I'm looking forward to seeing how things play out, and I think that's a good place to leave things. Let me know in the comments what you thought about this episode and the first half of the season. If you haven't read the book, where do you think things are headed? And if you have, how do you feel about some of the changes and what we're learning about these characters compared to what we knew from reading the book? Book spoilers are fine. Please just use line breaks to hide those under the fold when you comment so that they won't spoil anything for people who haven't read ahead. Please like this video if you enjoyed it. Please subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. And thanks for watching. I'll talk to you soon.